One thing we definitely don't see a lot anymore these days are tablets. Especially not the small ones and not really good ones. So maybe the Asus ZenPad 3.8 is just about that. So I would say let's find out and take a look at the design and build. The first thing that I want to point out that I like a lot is the fake leather back, because it feels of nice high quality and it has a nice feel and grip to it. So really nicely done here. In terms of the design, I have to say it's nice and thin, well rounded off everywhere, and in terms of the bezels, in my opinion, absolutely nice, because as you can see here, they aren't really too big or not too small, because you still have to wrap your hands around them and that works. But the button placement is a little bit inconvenient for me, because I would like to actually hold it like this, and then quite often I would hit the power button, which I think in general is just placed a little bit too much in the center. This should have been moved a little bit towards the front. Something you will have to get used to, which is a little bit inconvenient, but the rest of the bezels here on the side, if you use it in landscape, works absolutely nice. So no complaints about that in that regard. And in terms of build quality, also not really, because as you can see here, it bends a little bit because it's mostly of plastic, but it works out okay because it doesn't really creep or feel cheap at all. So for the price, they did definitely a nice job here in that regard. So here we have the camera. On the top we have the headphone jack, and on the left side here, if we open this flap, which you pretty much actually don't even notice all that much, we have the SIM card and SD card tray. Since this is the LTE version, as you can see here, this is definitely quite subtly integrated. On the bottom here we have the microphone and USB Type-C, and yes, we have front-facing stereo speakers, which is definitely always nice to see. So definitely a really good job in that regard. Now, what about the display? Before I'm actually going to talk about the display, I want to show you something that I'm not so happy about in terms of the display, because that would be the screen color mode, which is still one of the better things. But if you use Vivid mode, I definitely found it to be a little bit overboard, because compared to the Zen phones, this is just too much, and especially videos, skin colors and all that looked extremely off, and that's why I would use balanced mode. Maybe check the white setting, the white color temperature control the way you like it, and if that's still not good enough, you can use the customized mode to check the hue and saturation here. But it still had one flaw that I'm not the biggest fan of, and that is that there is some over sharpen going on. Therefore we see, especially on videos, quite some double contrast, and you see this sometimes in a few apps. Because otherwise the screen would have been really great, because it is already, due to its high resolution, very sharp. And due to IPS we have, of course, solid viewing angles. Maximum brightness is absolutely okay, not the very best one, but still good, if not maybe very good. And the colors, they can look nice if you calibrate to your way, but it's the little bit of enhancements that I see going on, and just mostly in terms of the over sharpening and double contrast, that just doesn't make me all that happy, and that's why I'm just calling it a good display and not quite a very good one. But let's see what the sound has to offer. So you can definitely see that if you use the audio wizard and turn it actually on, it will improve the speaker sound a lot. Even though it still, I have to say, sounds a little bit thin, but you have the options here to set to movie music or whatever, and then use some advanced effects. In the end, I still have to say though that it could have sounded a little bit richer, because if you boost the specific frequencies to make it feel a little bit richer, the sound didn't really improve all that much, because it still sounded a little bit weak and flat. But maximum volume overall was absolutely pleasing. It was louder than a lot of these tablets these days, and it still sounded better. So I would still call it very good, even though the tonal balance wasn't all that impressive to me. But even more so not impressive was the headphone jack, which I have to say is just about average, and I will point this out as a negative, like I do on pretty much 90% of all the other devices that I review. I want this to be improved in 2017, but as for right now, it is what it is. Okay, let's check the performance here, kill off all the apps, so we can see how quick those actually start. And even though we have the Snapdragon 650, I gotta say the performance is just very good. It could have been even better, I think so, because as you can see, app launch times are solid. They are okay, but I think I've seen this already fast. I'm not quite sure. Maybe they didn't use the fastest RAM or something like this, storage or so on, because it doesn't feel particularly snappy. And even though we have 4 GB of RAM, sometimes, especially if some more apps are loaded in the background, it starts to jank a little bit, because as you can see here, browsing, absolutely top, no real complaints here. This is usually where it performs on a really good level. It's not maybe perfect, and it due to being an IPS LCD doesn't always seem extremely buttery smooth. But I can't really complain about the performance. For a tablet of this price range, since it's still not a high-end tablet, this is performing actually on a really good level. No real complaints, because as you can see here, mostly smooth. And as you can see here, apps still are nicely in the RAM. We have 4 GB of RAM, even though it maybe feels more like 3 GB of RAM in normal use, because once you load up a few more, it starts to feel a little bit janky. And you will see this sometimes. But if you just have a moderate amount of apps, you will be absolutely pleased, and the overall performance is absolutely nice. And this actually already goes for the same for games, because I would kind of put the performance in between a Snapdragon 625 and maybe an 810 or 821, but without any heating issues, because this was absolutely no problem. It didn't get really warm at all. Okay, I have to say, since it's the winter, it's not warm anyways, so maybe that's helping. But the overall gaming performance is absolutely on a nice level. It's definitely above moderate frame rates with pretty much no frame drops. It's all very consistent and absolutely nice playable without any issues at all. My Bluetooth controller, once again, for some reason didn't work all that well. It did sometimes, but especially Modern Combat, it didn't work. But I kind of blame this more towards the controller by these days. So just to wrap up the performance, it is very good after all, especially for a tablet of this price range. I have no real complaints. It could have been with a little bit more optimization from Asus side, because I think still the UI kind of diminishes the overall performance. Could be even noticeably better, but as it is, it's still good. Now, let's check the battery life, and all I have to show here is 2.5 hours for 100% of charge, and this is absolutely fine, because the battery after all is quite great. It's still not like something like extremely quick charge or something like that, but for a tablet that you usually don't use like a phone, in my opinion, it's okay. And in terms of battery life, I would say it's decent, because I would say on one day, expect about, with at least my percentage of 40% brightness, I got about 7 hours of normal use, and over the course of 2 days, maybe like 6 hours. Not great, but definitely not bad. So decent enough. 6-7 hours, it's okay. Usually got me through 2 solid days without any bigger problems. Now, let's talk about software, and as you can see here, we have lock screen targets. You can swipe it up, and this is the inbuilt launcher. And what I like, and I've said this already on the ZenPhone reviews, that it's a quite customizable launcher. As you can see here, if you go into home screen, we have different grid sizes and even some gestures, some slow motion effect or wallpaper motion effects. And as you can see here, there are quite a lot of like swipe down gestures and so on. You have the support for icon packs, which you can download from the theme store. So I definitely think this is one of the best launchers that you can get, because it also has the draw and so on. But in the end, I wouldn't really use it. And here is actually one thing, especially the quick settings look extremely childish with big icons, and it looks a little bit odd in terms of colors. Here, I don't really mind it so much, and this is something that the theming engine that we have here actually doesn't really change, because what it changes usually is the wallpaper and maybe the icons, but not so much this here. And what we get here in terms of settings, as you can see, of course, you can rearrange the quick settings. Not quite as flexible as I would have wanted it to be, but still is okay. And if we go, for example, in the memory, you will see that we have the 4 GB version with 3.5 available. There is not really all that much. So if you go into ZenMotion, you will see that we can double tap to turn and off the screen. We have some screen off gestures, and I'm not sure what just happened. I don't know. Motion gestures, as we can see here. Yeah, the software is definitely capable. Yeah, we have the audio wizard, we have the display settings to enhance some things, but not really sure what to add here. It feels definitely like the software would have needed some more polish. It just doesn't feel modern anymore, and it feels like the performance gets a little bit bothered by it. That's where I just have to leave it. Updates, I won't really think they will be all that fast, but yeah. I think I'm dragging this through the mud, so let's just get to the pros and cons to end this here. Nice build quality, absolutely, for the price, absolutely okay. Feels solid enough. A little bit of creaking, nothing to be worried about. Compact design, I can hold it with one hand, which with my small hands isn't all that usual common. Nice leather texture, I like it, grippy, and it feels good. Good. Doesn't really attract any fingerprints or so, okay. Good display, like I said, if they would have gone away with the enhancements that you can't disable, just this double contouring and the over sharpening on some occasions, it would have been already very good because the colors are great, the brightness is okay, the white point you can set it and you have the options in the settings, but I don't get quite why the over sharpening. It seems a common thing of Asus. I noticed this on some laptops, but this display is so sharp, it has not needed it. Very good speaker after all. It sounds a little bit thin but loud enough and still is better than most of the other tablets, especially of this size. Okay, not something like a Huawei MediaPad 3 or maybe an Nvidia Shield, but something better, definitely better than something like the Tab S2 from Samsung. And then good to very good performance. Sounds actually a little bit almost too hard because I should call it very good considering this is priced at around 280 euros. Maybe I would say like that about in dollars as well. I couldn't really find any pricing here in the US. Yeah, it's not here. I'm not in the US, but this is what it is. So actually quite a good performance, absolutely. It could be called very good. And then we have decent battery life. Now, let's talk about the negatives. Slightly odd button placement. If you are someone who uses a lot like this, that I actually didn't, you could, yeah, you have to kind of fiddle around how you will hold it not to press any buttons. Display enhancements, I talked about that. Narrow sound jet of the sound. It doesn't really feel like the sound is coming like this, but it's more coming like this to you. This is, yeah, a minor complaint. Average headphone jack, you will see this in pretty much every review for a long time already. Slightly jankish and sluggish at times. If you load up way more apps than you maybe should and jump around through all of them, then it sometimes starts to jank up. Just minor. The really big janks are really rare. The more smaller ones that you don't really bother about happen a little bit more often, but nothing really big. Zen UI needs a lot of optimization. Not just in terms of performance, but also in terms of design. I just don't like that so much at all. And the UI design, as I said, is, well. Okay. I have a little bit of harder time to judge if this is a good buy or not, mostly because of the price in the US that I couldn't find. But let's just see it from what it is here in Europe, about 280 euros. And it is therefore actually one of the cheaper, smaller tablets. Sure, something like the Shield K1 from Nvidia is a little bit cheaper with about 200, where this is 280. But we get a different form factor. We get the new device and so on, so it's bigger. That's mostly a big difference because I can use a 4:3 aspect ratio device, way more comfortable in both positions, where I don't like so much the smaller tablets. This may be just personal, but their 16:10 or 16:9 feels just way too limiting in terms of screen real estate. So I prefer 4:3, especially for the smaller ones. And what do we have here in terms of comparison or competition? We have the Tab S2 8 that is like $50 more and offers the better screen. Maybe the build quality, battery life, I can't say so much about it because I've only used the 9.7 inch version, but speakers are definitely weaker. Performance was about on the same, and the software was a little bit more polished, I would say. So this is still viable because it's cheaper and it gets all the jobs that a tablet should do as well. If we compare it now with the MediaPad 3 from Huawei, definitely it can't hold up in terms of display. Sound, even though it's good, the one on the MediaPad is better. Performance, I actually like this one a little bit more. I did not like the MediaPad performance so much because of the high resolution screen. It just couldn't keep it up, especially also in games. Battery life was also very similar. Software, I don't think anyone who likes EMUI will have a problem with this one because they are both not the most popular UIs. But as you can see, the competition is there, but it's also not that strong. And if you don't want to pay all that much, this is still a legit buy. If you don't want something like an iPad mini, it is a solid choice after all. But I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed that all the available, especially 4x3 or let's say just smaller tablets, aren't what they should be, because no one seems to want to make a high-end small tablet, just about above average, or let's say above mid-range, which is a little bit disappointing after all. But this is where I'm going to leave it. I guess you have all the information now. Comments down below, likes maybe, subscribe, and yeah, wish you a nice day. Bye.